The world is turning to green technology in an effort to reduce our impact on the environment. It is a global movement, moving at different speeds in different jurisdictions. All the same, we're all moving towards an energy transition. What is rarely discussed, however, is our relationship with the elements that are required to build green technology. Where will these elements come from? Interestingly, they'll come from the same places we currently mine. We'll still need to extract elements from Mother Earth. The difference, however, will be in the end use, but not in the source. Precious metals play a vital role in computing technologies, and particularly in cleaning the emissions that exit the tailpipe of gas and diesel vehicles. Platinum and palladium, for example, are rare and precious metals that are an absolute requirement in catalytic converters. And research is underway to determine if palladium can not only speed up the rate of the battery charging, but also extend the life of the charge. With more than 1 billion cars on the road around the world, we sat down with platinum and palladium miner Mike Jones for a conversation that matters about the ongoing role of metals in the green economy.
Conversations That Matter is a partner program for the Center for Dialogue at Simon Fraser University. The production of this program is made possible thanks to the support of the following and viewers like you.
Mr. Jones, welcome to Conversations That Matter.
Thanks for having me.
You work in the mining business.
Yes.
And there's many people who would go, that's yesterday's news, who cares? You know, the resource sector, we're moving away from that. We're moving into high-tech, green tech.
Sure.
But you're saying, whoa, not so fast. How come?
Well, the first point I'd make is everything in the world is either grown or mined. So think about everything from this table to that pen to your glasses, it's either grown or mined.
Right.
One or the other. So you can't get away from it. Doesn't matter what tech you have. If you look at all...
Even glass, because you need sand, don't you?
Sure, absolutely. You got to mine silica. So there's another example. I mean, you can't touch it. Unless you're going to eat it, it's probably mined. So even petroleum is mined out of the ground, out of an oil well. So all of these things are required. And you know, if we talk about high tech, now we're talking about all kinds of specialty items that are harder to find, that are more unique, have specific properties. Even in things like electrical appliances. I mean, you're talking about copper, you're talking about zinc, you're talking about, you want to talk about your cell phone, if we go into that, you got the glass on the front panel, you've got how the panel is made. All of those things require very specific components that you have to go find.
Right, well, we had Gianni Kovacevic on a couple of years ago talking about with the increased demand for electricity, there's going to be an increased demand for copper. You can't have one without the other. And people will say, oh, no, you can use aluminum. But no, you don't get the same sort of efficient transmission of the electricity over aluminum the way you do out of copper, which, of course, is, to your point, mined.
Mined, absolutely. And, you know, I mean, we do know one way that electricity can get through the air is lightning, but, you know, that's not a great transmission medium. It has a lot of losses. So
and
you're
you
going to end up...
pinpoint the delivery point
the delivery's a little iffy as well.
So,
no, absolutely. And, you know, copper is a pretty common element in the Earth's surface, so we can go and find it. But to your point, mining is viewed as a passé industry, and the capital going into the industry has been really drawn down. So, you know, my view is that in all these metals, we're looking at a pipeline that's pretty empty. When you look at projects that are coming online as prices move a little bit, they're the old projects you've heard about, and not a lot of fundamental exploration or discovery going on around the world.
And yet, as we know, as we just talked about, the fact that there's nothing that you can have that isn't mined in some fashion to create what we want.
Right.
The cameras that we're recording on, the microphone that your you know, your voice is being picked up on. We need to have metals coming out of the earth to be able to create those products.
And the argument always comes, of course, about recycling. So people talk about recycling these metals, and you know, particularly some of the more rare ones. And it's true, we can effectively recycle some of these metals. The problem is the growing number of people in the middle class. So the world is actually getting a lot more prosperous, a lot more successful. There's a lot more people who want the things that we're used to every day.
Right. You can't deny them.
And they won't have themselves denied.
Right.
And so they're going to demand these appliances. They're going to demand cell phones and so on, and electricity delivered to the home, which not all the world is electrified yet. Lots of work to do, especially in Asia. So these things are, the demand for them, no matter how much you recycle, even if you recycled 100% of what we use every day and throw away, which of course is unrealistic, but you'd still need more metal because there's more people who want the stuff.
Got to get you to hang on for a second while we take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. Sorry for the interruption, but I need your help. I'm asking you to support the show by becoming a patron. That means pledging $1 per show. Conversations is a unique program. There's no grandstanding, no arguing, no yelling. Instead, I sit down with people who have unique insights, specialized knowledge, and experiences that inform and enlighten. And we do this on an incredibly limited budget with a very small crew. Well, this is my office and it's where I edit the show. And then once it's ready, we give it away. You know, so many different websites around the world are carrying the show, but they get it for free. They don't pay us. So I'm asking you to pledge $1 per show by going to patreon.com/conversations that matter. Thanks. We want to keep producing conversations, and with your help, we can. Now let's get back to the show. There's a whole body of people who say, okay, let's put a stop to fossil fuel burning automobiles. I mean, there's a proposal to introduce that in British Columbia that people are floating around right now. Yet, when we take a look at the current technology and where we are, some of those timelines, you go, okay, is it possible? And what's one of the biggest impediments? Battery life, charging speeds. So what role do resources play in helping to solve that problem?
So obviously they're incredibly important, but let's have a look at where we are today first. Get a look at the starting point, because I think the first thing that gets missed is the starting point. A lot of people talk about these vehicles and so on, and they're going to be 30% of the market or 50% of the market, but where actually are we today? So, you know, the first thing is, for me, since I started in looking for platinum and palladium, at that time, those metals were incredibly important for the automobile industry. But at that time, we were talking about 50 million vehicles a year. Today, globally, global sales. That's about 15 years ago. Today, we're at 100 million vehicles a year.
Over what?
Over a year, sold a year to 100 million vehicles a year being sold.
So from 50 to 100 million years in what time
15 years.
In 15 years.
Right.
And they all still need those same products.
So the other part of the story of where we are today is that only 0.1% of those are fully battery electric vehicles. So we do have hybrids that are a little bit more than that, but it's still less than 1% of the vehicles in the world have any kind of electrification. So we're a long way away from a major adoption in the world, and for the reasons that you talked about. First of all, the battery life. Second of all, the basic technology and all the safety that goes with that technology, which is a conversation we don't see very often yet. And then there's the grid. So how are we going to get the power onto the grid to be able to supply this? And we all know what time we need to supply this at. It's exactly at 5:30 when everybody gets home. So everybody plugs the car in at exactly the same moment. So listen, electric cars will have a role in the market. We see the potential for that to be a growing part of the market. But really, it's a long way out. And the internal combustion engine, I mean, today, there's over 1 billion cars on the road, all with internal combustion engines. 1 billion every day.
I didn't know there were that many cars.
It's 100 million cars a year and 1 billion cars on the road. So this technology has been honed for a long time, and it's important to remember the efficiencies that have been brought through the internal combustion engine. I mean, this system has been sharpened and sharpened and sharpened for 100 years. And particularly in the last 20 years, the internal combustion engine has got a lot more efficient. So, you know, my view is there's a lot to be turned out of this system yet. And you know, we've got a lot of technological problems to solve before we get to a major adoption of electric vehicles.
Well, one of them is battery life.
Absolutely.
Or charge life. Well, and battery life. Like,
sure.
Those two are not the same thing, but they're connected.
Right. So there's three main problems in the battery technology. The first one is the overpotential. So you've got to push more energy into the battery than you're ever going to get out of the battery. So batteries are not 100% efficient. You got to push energy in them to get them to charge up. And then, as you point out, the length of time that it takes to charge the battery, and then the amount of charge you can put on the battery. And then the final thing is the number of cycles you can get out of the battery before it's dead.
Right.
So all of those things are obviously being worked on intensely, but still a lot of challenges ahead.
But you told me off camera that you have found a couple of scientists around the world that are actually working with platinum. And of course you have a self-interest in that, but they're working with platinum to address a number of those issues. What have you learned so far?
Sure. So, well, we should start again from the starting point. So interestingly, most people know platinum because of platinum jewelry. But what they don't know about is platinum.
Records, of course.
Yes, sure. And its premium role in the world as sort of a precious metal. Interestingly, currently, gold trades over platinum in price, which is a very unusual time for the metal itself. And platinum's use has other than jewelry, has two other major uses. First of all, in autocatalysis in the tailpipe of your car,
and catalytic converters.
And catalytic converters, and that's a legislated use. You remember those billion cars that we talked about on the road? Well, a lot of those are diesel, and if they're a diesel car, they have to have a platinum converter, not a cheaper palladium converter. Happens today now, however, the palladium price is actually over the platinum price as well, and that's partly to do with auto preference, people going away from diesel towards gasoline. Palladium is a sister metal of platinum. It's on the periodic table beside platinum. And it also does the catalytic function. In fact, its largest role in life is that it is a catalytic converter for about 85% of its use.
So how does that work? How is it?
How does a catalytic converter work?
Yeah, well, and that palladium and platinum are so vitally important when dealing with gas and diesel engine exhaust.
Sure. So the catalytic process, that what's happening here is that what we don't want to come out of the tailpipe is carbon monoxide and nitrous monoxide. The monoxide versions are really nasty in the environment, create smog. Sulfur oxide creates acid rain. They're nasty. That's what creates the smog. So in 1973, when Los Angeles went brown, the catalytic converter got invented. So what's happening is along comes a sulfur monoxide, and it says, wow, there's a palladium piece of palladium sitting in the tailpipe, and it says, this is fantastic, I love palladium, and it separates the sulfur and the oxygen onto the surface of the catalyst.
Just out of a natural attraction.
Correct, just by where platinum and palladium sit on the periodic table, they are transition elements, and that's what they want to do. They love pulling molecules apart and grabbing onto elements, and so they do that. And along comes a little bit more oxygen, and the sulfur says, that's really cool, that's a double oxygen, I can grab that, become sulfur double oxide and go out the tailpipe. And that's what happens.
And so it converts it.
Yes. So
it's not even hanging on to it, it's actually converting it.
It's actually just residing there for a while to be a catalyst in the reaction, and then the reaction happens and the elements leave. And the beauty of it is nothing happens to the platinum or palladium, it just sits there happily in the tailpipe.
What an elegant solution.
Yes, and it's legislated, and it's for a billion cars on the road. So going back to your fundamental question at the beginning, are we going to need this stuff? Yeah, we need this stuff for a long time.
And all those billions of cars that are out there.
Right. And going back to the original topic about new tech and green tech and where are we going relative to metals, a lot of people are very interested in lithium batteries, and there's a lot of conversation around lithium.
Right.
Lithium is a pretty common element in the Earth's surface. We can find it in hard rock, we can find it in salt pans, we can find it in a number of places. Lithium's not that rare. There's a lot of hype about finding lithium, but there's lots of it.
Well, I was reading that there's even lithium in some of the waste materials from the bitumen.
Sure. Yeah. Yes, correct.
You take the oil out of the bitumen, and there is lithium that can
you can get it that way. It's a hard way to get it, but you can get it that way.
And
sure. But it's common. There's lots of it. So the thing with the lithium is, again, your basic periodic table: hydrogen, helium, lithium, beryllium, boron. You remember from high school?
No.
So okay. So hydrogen, helium, lithium. Lithium is a great element because it has a very high ability to exchange ions, and it's very light because it's number 3 on the periodic table. So it's great for power to weight ratio. But there's a few problems with lithium. First of all, it is very reactive. If you put it out in the air, it'll oxidize like that. And if you put water on it, it explodes. So that's not very happy. No. So especially in a car.
Or an airplane.
Or any of those places, right. So there are issues around how you handle, which is why I mentioned the safety piece on going to full electric vehicles, ubiquitous. that still all needs a lot of work.
That engineering has to be worked out.
It's still in the development phase, and there's 1 billion cars we're talking about. So the probability of something going wrong when you have 1 billion cars, it's going to happen, as we all know too well. So lithium is common. It's there. The real nirvana of battery technology is actually in lithium oxygen. So most batteries now are in lithium sulfur, they're in lithium manganese. There's various other lithium combinations that are being looked at. Lithium oxygen is very interesting because it has the highest amount of ion exchange. So it's theoretically 10 times more powerful than the other forms of lithium batteries.
Okay.
So very interesting. However, it has a real problem with cycling, being able to charge it up and draw it down. And also being able to charge it effectively is a little more challenging. So what we found in some of our research is there's actually people working on this that use platinum and palladium as a way to make the lithium more easily charged and for the battery to cycle longer. So this is quite an interesting forefront of research, and particularly as a producer of platinum and palladium, we have a vested interest in this, looking at changing the move to electric vehicles, which would move away from the catalytic converter use, and looking at it as an electric vehicle use as well. So there is some interesting research, but again, it ties back to the essential elements and being able to mine them.
So what is the reaction that's happening when you put platinum or palladium in with lithium that makes it different?
Sure.
And helps to address some of those issues that are the shortcomings of having this kind of powered vehicle?
Sure. So the reaction that's happening with lithium is that essentially you're combining lithium with an element and stripping it apart again. So with lithium oxygen, you create a lithium oxide, and then you push it back to being lithium again. And when you produce lithium oxygen, that moves the electron around. So it's creates energy by that chemical reaction. So when you charge it, you push it back to lithium metal again. The challenge is actually at the cathode. What happens is that you tend to make lithium carbonate out of the electrolyte, and that stops the reaction from being able to happen. So it's not a conductor and it doesn't work. So your uncharging becomes a problem. Where the platinum and palladium come in is in their catalytic properties again. They tend to prevent the formation of that lithium carbonate. So it's a very interesting new development. Very technical, but it's on the forefront.
Holy smokes. So it goes back to the original point that without these precious metals, we can't do an awful lot of what we want if we want to move towards that kind of battery transportation model.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that looking at the internal combustion engine as a long-term use, I think it'll be around for a good long time. I mean, even out to 2030, 2035, we're going to see a very large number of internal combustion engines. And the other thing about that is, what are the standards that those engines have to make? So, one of the things that's happened since the 1970s is that the rules around cars has gotten more and more stringent. So that what comes out of your tailpipe has to be cleaner and cleaner. And the way that the car makers have dealt with that is adding more platinum and palladium into the tailpipe. So there's an interesting aspect there that as the internal combustion engine gets more and more pressure on it for clean air, the response is to put more and more PGMs into the platinum group elements into the tailpipe. And that's been happening over the last 15, 20 years.
So what happens that we go, okay, well that's the sunset industry, this is the new industry. How come we lose sight of the fact that they're interconnected?
I think there's not a lot of conversations about where stuff comes from. Power comes out of the wall, right? You plug it in.
Right.
It's a common way of, so chicken comes from the store, right? I mean, clearly it doesn't. But I think that there has to be a lot more thought about where stuff comes from. And as you say, how do we get from here to there? We have to have readily available materials that can make these techmonizes for us.
Do we know that lithium batteries are going to be the answer? Because you hear about other substances as well. Carbonite is being touted as another storage system that charges faster, holds the charge longer.
Sure,
but we don't know.
And that's the thing is that science keeps looking for these things, but it's the investment into the finding of fundamental materials. And I think sometimes the theoretical research gets a little bit ahead of the curve, where people invent a technology, but the stuff isn't there to make it practically.
The energy transition is already underway. But as you point out, there's a billion vehicles out there that still need these fuels and elements. You take a look at the time that it took to go from a horse to an automobile in a far less complex world, more like 2080, 2090, before we're going to see the shift move over to being vehicles that are running on a different power source than they are today.
But I think that's the common perception is that it's a shift.
Yes.
That there's something dramatic that happens, and that's not the trend of the automobile. And
it's a refinement, as you pointed out.
Yeah, there's a continual refinement of the internal combustion engine and its efficiency, and it has a trade-off against the abilities of the electric vehicle to do it, and there'll be a balancing of that. And it's even like looking at platinum and palladium and diesel versus gasoline. I mean, many European countries are talking about banning diesel. We're going to ban diesel entirely. It's very dramatic, and it might be politically expedient, and it would have a drastic negative effect on the platinum market and make palladium very interesting,
right,
which is going on. But
so your interest comes in.
Yeah, I'm always
yeah.
interested in those.
Yeah.
But going back to the fuel source, I mean, one thing that everybody forgets is that a barrel of oil only has so much diesel and so much gasoline in it. You can't make a barrel of oil into 100% gasoline. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's not what's inside the barrel. So
there's a variety of different
things inside a barrel of crude oil, and you got to make out of it what's inside the barrel. So you can tweak it a little bit with refining, but basically it's fixed. So if you ban diesel in every European major city, diesel's going to get very cheap, which will make people want to drive diesel because it's very cheap. So,
typical cycle.
So there's a balancing effect in here, and I think that that's the case with electric vehicles and the internal combustion engine. Both have a use, both have a place, and that they will balance over time. But there's this concept out there, partly driven by the media interest in it, that there's going to be this dramatic switch from one day we're just going to wake up and everybody, all billion cars on the road, are going to be electric. And of course, that's not what's going to happen. It's going to take 25, 30, 50 years for a transition to happen. And in certain applications, the electric vehicle may be absolutely ideal. And in other applications, it'll only be internal combustion engines. And I think that's a more realistic, balanced sort of view of the world.
Thank you for this illuminating discussion about
my pleasure.
Transportation to green technology and where we're going. And I think how we're going to get there.
It'll be an adventure.
It will.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.